Well, like a lot of the baby boomers, we kind of grew up on the Beatles, or started out with the Beatles. Ed Sullivan seems to be the jumping off point for everybody. When we saw Ed Sullivan in a lot of the band documentaries you see of bands from our era, we saw Ed Sullivan and it was the Beatles. Well, one night I was sitting home, we saw Ed Sullivan and the Beatles, and it was the same way with myself. My interest in music and drumming really picked up the night that I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. It was something that, not only changed my life, but changed a lot of people's lives that were later to become musicians themselves. They can trace that back to that particular show. So seeing Ringo and the guys playing those songs really had an impact. My parents didn't get it, but that's okay. It was something that I knew that's something really special there, and influenced me, and I knew that was something I wanted to do. Early influences for me is a good question because I didn't live in the United States in a lot of my early drumming years. My dad was in the Air Force, so we were stationed in the Philippines, or we were stationed in Japan, or we were stationed in Montana, places that were kind of not really on the road.
On the musical grid, right?
Yeah, no, it was, so I mean, I would get a lot of stuff from the radio, but there wasn't a lot of things I could go see, or concerts coming to town out in the middle of Montana when my dad was putting, missiles in the ground, it just wasn't something. So I spent a lot of time by myself, and not necessarily out of choice, but there was, I was there by myself with my mom and dad, and I taught myself how to play. And that's how I spent a lot of my time, was teaching myself how to play drums, and starting out with just a snare drum kept things rather limited, but eventually it grew from there. White Clover. Oh yeah, White Clover days. White Clover was a band out of Topeka, and it had a lot of Topeka guys in it at one time or another. But the most famous incarnation of White Clover was the White Clover just before we became Kansas. And that was with myself and Dave Hope, Rich Williams, Robbie Steinhardt, and Steve Walsh. We hadn't added Carrie yet to the band, because once we added Carrie to the band, then we became Kansas. But that White Clover, they were just a group of guys that we lived in Topeka, and we traveled around the state in a school bus playing our shows, and we were just a local band. Well, yeah, that was White Clover down in New Orleans, playing in a club called the Roach. That probably tells you enough about it right there. But we were down there, and Jim Morrison came in one night and got up on stage with us and performed Light My Fire, which then led to us later opening as Kansas, opening for the Doors at the Warehouse in New Orleans. And we actually ended up jamming with them after our set for their last song of their headlining set. And that ended up being the last song the Doors ever performed. And Kansas was on stage. Some of the members of Kansas were on stage playing with Jim Morrison before he died. Well, at the time, it was special, but we didn't know it was going to be that special, to where it would be the last gig, and actually the last song that the Doors ever played together. So, yeah, playing with the Doors. Not a lot of bands get to say that they got to do that, so we were very fortunate. Yeah, our manager, Phil Muso, rest his soul, lived in Topeka, and he was from New Orleans, and he used to talk about, I can get you guys some gigs down in New Orleans. We kept going, okay. And he kept saying that, and we kept going, okay. So finally, we went down there, and we went down there a lot, and played the New Orleans Pop Festival. We played the French Quarter. We played really a lot all over Louisiana, and then we came back to Topeka, and that's where the band Kansas took off from there. That's a good question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. How did I meet Kerry Livgren? Let me call him. No, I'm kidding. Kerry actually lived in my neighborhood in Topeka. It was a neighborhood called Knollwood. And I used to see Kerry drive by on this motor scooter all the time, drive by. And we went to the same high school. He was a year older than myself. But back in those days, on band days, they were called band days, like on Fridays when all the bands were going to be playing somewhere, some of the guys would wear their stage clothes, their band clothes to school. I never did that, but Kerry did. And so I knew he was in a band, and some of the other guys in his band wore their clothes. So I knew Kerry was in a band, and I went to see his band a number of times, and they were really good.
Yeah.
They were really a good band, and so kind of made a mental checklist that someday I'd like to play with Kerry, and we became friends over time. And yeah, I think I went over to Kerry's house, and I said, you got a great band, I've got a great band. We ought to put the two of them together. And so we talked about it, and that was what was referred to as Kansas One. That is the first Kansas that was kind of those two bands combined.
I see.
And it was myself and Dave Hope, and then a number of other guys from Kerry's band. And that eventually kind of fell apart and stuff. And then Kansas 2, we got back together. We got White Clover, and we took Kerry out of that band, and he joined our band, and then we went from there. Well, let me talk a bit about going to England.
That'd be great.
And why I did, because I'd kind of, I don't know, I was 20, 21, and I'd played around Topeka and really there wasn't much going on there. So I thought, I'll go to London. Not sure where that came from, but I had ended up with the band school bus. So I sold that and had like $800 or $900 left after that, and used that to fly to London with my drums in baggage, in the airplane. So I got off and I pull all my drums off, and I'm standing there and I'm going, okay, I have all these drums, now what am I going to do? I happened to run into a guy who was there hiking around London, and he needed a place to stay, so we went and got an apartment or a flat together, and I started running ads in the Melody Maker and the music newspapers there. And I got a call from somebody, and I met that guy, and that's how I kind of got out and started meeting other people. But it never really worked out, because being an American, they wanted me to play blues, jazz, or country. That's what they were. And of course, I wanted to play rock, but they had a lot of great British drummers, so what did they need me for? And so I was over there for 3 or 4 months, and then got to come home, but it taught me a lot about how much I missed my bandmates that I'd left in Topeka. So I wasn't back for one day, and I'm calling Rich Williams, and I'm calling Steve Walsh, and calling Dave Hope, and let's get back together. Let's get the band back together. And it eventually turned into Kansas. Well, when you look back at that time period, that time in musical history, of course, we didn't realize it at the time, because we were just, like I said, 19, 20 years old. But the bands that were coming out were bands that would go on to be the biggest bands ever. Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Santana, Chicago, all these bands constantly, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, King Crimson, all this stuff, as well as, the Young Rascals and Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels and Ike and Tina Turner. There was so many diverse styles of music that living in Kansas, we were getting them from all sides. So even though Kansas ended up with the band Kansas ended up with a more progressive sound, we were really influenced by a lot of different things. The Yardbirds, with Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page. There were so many great things happening, and then you had kind of the psychedelic era with Jefferson Airplane and Quicksilver Messenger Service and all the things that were going on, Grateful Dead, all the things that were going on the West Coast. That was coming at us too. So it was
a blend of so many different.
It was insane.
Yeah.
It was very hard to just say, well, we're going to sound just like this, because we were influenced by so many different things. And I think that's why Kansas had such a hodgepodge of sounds, and the way it was when our first album came out. It was very hard for reviewers to pigeonhole us, because we had a little bit of this and a lot of that and some of this, and so it was very hard for them to go, this is a band from Kansas that sounds like something you would expect from Kansas. No. We had British influence, we had Chicago influence, we had influence, blues, and we had influence, you know, from all over the world, really. So it was.
I remember the first time I saw Chicago
Yeah.
during the Transit Authority
Yeah.
era.
They were CTA at the time.
Yeah, and I was so taken by their rhythm sections.
Oh,
I mean,
God,
it must have really blew you away.
Yeah,
because
Peter Cetera and
Yeah.
Danny Serafin. I mean,
Yeah.
whoa.
the rhythm section was amazing.
Yeah, and then Terry Kath is one of the best guitar players that ever walked the planet, rest his soul.
Yeah.
You know, he was incredible, and yeah,
And their vocals.
Yeah.
No one
Just-
had really heard.
No.
Well, look, I'm going to drop back. The Beatles were,
Yeah.
know, somewhere like
Sure.
that. But I mean,
well, Peter Cetera was really the first tenor lead singer. You know, him and Mark Farner were really the first two from Grand Funk. Really, those you know, high tenor voices that became such a standard in rock for a long time. You know, and yeah, that was a heck of a band.
that was
And Grand Funk, oh my gosh.
Oh, I remember. the
Tear it
first time.
up.
Yeah, right.
Tear it up. So, you know, we were just young guys seeing this stuff for the first time. So, and Hendrix was there at the same time, and you know, he was beyond words. I mean, it couldn't even describe what he played on the guitar. It was so incredible. Well, we were down there playing in the Roach, and it was 1969, and the guy that was owner of the Roach was also one of the promoters of the New Orleans Pop Festival, which was right after Woodstock. And so you see all the list of, you know, It's a Beautiful Day and all these bands that, you know, we weren't really super familiar with. And there was one on there, he said, I've got you guys on the show. You're going to be on the second night. You'll be playing right next to a band called Santana. And they're kind of a bongo conga band, you know, they're just kind of, so we thought, well, I'm going to blow them off the stage. That's going to be great. Well, we had no idea how incredible Santana was. Why would we, you know? But the stage was split, and we were to follow Santana. So they're playing Soul Sacrifice. 80,000 people just going freaking, and we're going, oh my gosh, we're going to come out and play some cover songs, you know? But as it were, the sheriff shut down the festival that night because it passed the curfew, and then we opened the festival the next day, like at noon or something. And but that's how close it was to that car wreck of us, you know, learning the hard way who Santana really was. Michael Shreve playing his drum solo. I mean, I'm watching that going, okay. So yeah, it was.
So to see that drum, that percussion music,
The best.
No one had it.
Never to be repeated.
Right.
When you think
No one-
about it, there was never, even though there's probably some Latin bands
Sure.
that come very, there's never been another Santana. You know, nothing's ever come out that had that magnitude, that impact of the whole world. You
Yeah,
know,
he took that Tito Puente sound.
oh, all the way, and put a rock guitar to it. You know,
Yeah.
really cool. We were just coming off stage. The next, you know, I said we played the next day. We played at noon. As we were coming off stage, I heard this kind of gruff voice go, "Hey, come over here for a minute." And I'm looking around, and I didn't think it came from that woman sitting there, but as it was, it was her voice. And it was Janis Joplin. And she called me over, and she said, "You guys are really good. What's you guys' name again?" You know, and I told her, and she said, "Well, don't you guys ever give up. Don't you give up. You guys are good. You hang in there. Something's going to happen." And I told the rest of the guys in the band, I go, "Well, that's cool, you know." But so yeah, it was interesting times for sure. Yeah, I mean, it was just listening to King Crimson on their albums and what was going on there. Of course, all this was coming out of the British invasion. You know, that was really where progressive music came from. I'm never quite sure what that title applied to, but it was, you know, it was King Crimson. It was Tarkus by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Yeah. It was, you know, Pink Floyd. There was just so many, you know, great things musically, guys that took the instruments to another level. And it wasn't just playing, it was really playing. So King Crimson, once we got to see them, was really an experience too, because it's so heavy. And one thing you always kind of have to remember that makes a band kind of memorable is if nobody ever covers their songs. You know, you never went somewhere and sit back and listen to a King Crimson cover band. I mean, I'm sure they're out there nowadays. With YouTube and stuff, they're probably out there. But back then, the stuff was so incredibly difficult that King Crimson was into itself.
Hard to duplicate
Well,
that
yes,
guitar player.
you know, the band, yes, the same way.
Oh, yeah.
You know, again, with Bill Bruford on drums and stuff, there was just music, again, that was never to really be repeated. And it's a time period that a lot of people compare to the classical composers.
Yes.
You know, you have a time period where all this classical music was written, never to be repeated.
Right.
So as you sit here today, you know, in 2019, trying to think of all the new bands that have come along that replicate Yes or replicate, there's no replication. You know, those bands created that music and will stand alone probably forever. And one thing you always forget about the Allman Brothers was their time signatures.
Oh yeah, that's another.
They just weren't a 4/4 blues
Right,
band.
right.
They had all kinds of different time signatures. And that was something we noticed, and we go, God, these guys are taking things, you know,
To a
way
whole
out there and
yeah.
really, really cool.
Yeah.
And it did have a slight influence on us because of the two guitars and the different time signatures and stuff. Both Kerry and Steve wrote with the violin. I mean, you got to remember, we had an electric violin.
Yeah.
So that lends itself
Sure.
to orchestral sounds that you wouldn't ordinarily get if you didn't have it. So Kerry and Steve wrote things in such a way that gave Robbie a chance to play these beautiful orchestral passages, like the Middle of Dust in the Wind. The Middle of Dust in the Wind is really one of the most famous violin parts.
Yes.
When I say famous, just known.
Right.
And, you know, Robbie played that violin part and Kerry wrote it, and it was very cool. And to this day, it's a well-known violin. It's not really a solo. It is an orchestration that Kerry wrote. Having a violin in your band is something that you have to pay attention to, but it's never anything that influenced in my playing, because basically I'm a rock drummer.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I grew up with the other guys in the band, and we played clubs in Kansas, high schools, frat parties. We played rec centers. We played a lot of places that a lot of other bands played. So those are the influences I brought with me. Once the violin was added, it was like, I remember watching Robbie tune. I always thought violins were tuned down here, you know, instead of up here. There's those little tuning, and I'm going, what's he doing there? You know, it was very interesting to me because I didn't know anything about the violin. I still don't, except it's an incredible instrument and it's incredibly difficult to play and to play correctly. And Robbie was great, so it was just the kind of thing that I just kind of stayed out of it. You know, you just kind of he had his parts and I had my parts, and thanks to the guy that wrote the songs, as well as Robbie's ability to play those parts,
Sure.
it sounded really good. You know, at first, again, you got to remember, we've got 3 albums out. The band is working and working and working. Left Overture hasn't hit yet. Carry On Wayward Son doesn't even exist. So we're opening band, co-headliner, opening band, part of a package, headlining a club. You know, there's nothing really incredible going on, but it's escalating. We're growing. We're constantly growing. And we kept playing Pennsylvania, and we couldn't figure it out. What is the deal? Because like, okay, we got a new, we get the tour, and we're going, what's with the 8 dates in Pennsylvania again? You know, I mean, not that we didn't like Pennsylvania, but it just seemed odd. Of all the states, we weren't doing 8 states in Kansas. 8 cities in Kansas. We weren't doing 8 cities in Missouri. I mean, we had to go up there and back and forth and back and forth and up and down. I mean, we played everywhere. Well, so finally, we got to meet Rich Engler, and we'd heard about him, and just that he was a promoter that was constantly working with Kansas. And I guess our first impression is, well, this must be Rich Engler Jr. You know, where's his dad? Because he literally looked, 19 years old. And we're going, okay, well, yeah, it's nice meeting you. And we kept, where's your dad, the promoter?
Right.
And he was the promoter, and he had and to this day,
He's still a great looking
he still
guy.
looks half his age, So that was a little disconcerting at first, but then we got used to it. And the next thing was his clothing. This was the 70s with jeans and t-shirts and long hair. He was very styled and wore shirts with sweaters, V-necks over them, and long camel hair coats and stuff. And who wears camel hair coats? And would drive these fancy Maseratis and all this kind of stuff. And he was just very young, so it was a bit off-putting at first. But then once we got to know him, he became one of the guys, and it was great. But I'll always remember the first time meeting him is, where's your dad? That was the thing we looked for. The term neatnik applied to Rich, definitely, just because he was always very well dressed and very professional, and that wasn't us, but that was him. So yeah, maybe that's what he liked about us. I don't know. Why Rich was the embodiment of the rock and roll promoter. We had been around a lot of promoters. We were working with a lot of promoters. Usually what happens with most promoters, now I won't say this about all of them, but back then there was no Live Nation, there was no AEG, there was no conglomerates of promoters. It was just one guy.
Yeah,
And then you'd go to New Orleans and it was one guy. And you go to New York and it was Ron Delsner. There was just certain guys, Bill Graham, Sam, there was just, and Rich was one of these guys. And they all had their strong parts, but as Kansas over our career would start to wane, you're not going to sell millions of records every album that comes out, so you're going to have some failures and things are going to start to fall off a bit. A lot of those promoters went away. Like, guys, it was great. Or, are you going to be promoting us? No, guys, it's just not like it used to be. I wish you the best. Not Rich.
says a lot about the man.
Yeah. He always hung in there with us to this day. So that says a lot just about him as a person, let alone a promoter. Well, the music of Kansas and the city of Pittsburgh doesn't seem like, natural bedfellows. It's not like the kind of thing that, well, if there was ever going to be a place where Kansas breaks, it's going to be Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That you would think it'd be more like Kansas City or maybe Wichita or Omaha, something in the Midwest. But our single, Can I Tell You, came out in Pittsburgh, and WDVE and a couple other radio stations started playing it like crazy. And so our music is what preceded us. Our music was actually accepted much more before our live show was. So to this day, when we go to Pittsburgh, it's always a special event because Pennsylvania and Kansas is musically almost synonymous, with each other. It's, it might sound a little odd, but that's what it is. Yeah, the Stanley Theater is one of those places that bands always hear about. You always hear, hope you get to play the Stanley Theater. Hope you get to play this place or that place. And we did get to play it, and we were supposed to play it with us and Styx and Queen. Wow, what a lineup! Speaking of bands that were fantastic, Queen and Styx are definitely in that category. But it was one of those things that we got there for the show, and Freddie Mercury got sick, and he wasn't able to do the show. So Rich came to us and said, "Okay, Styx, Kansas, you guys got to add more time, and you're both headliners." Of course, Styx played, and then Kansas played at that time, and that's really by Freddie being sick and Rich being supportive of us and putting us in the headline slot is really what changed our career, not only in Pittsburgh, but across the country. Kansas from there we started getting a lot of headlining offers. Then, of course, once Left Overture hit, it was a lot easier to get a headlining show with a song like Wayward Son on the radio. Yeah, I think lots of times that earlier in your career, when you think about a promoter, he's your boss. And even to this day, we usually think of promoters, we're working for them. They're paying us. We owe them the best that we can deliver, as well as our fans. And so Rich, being the first promoter that we really got close to, when he came in and said, you guys need to do this, it wasn't like, well, sit down, let's talk about money. Or it was like, okay, if that's what you want, if that's what we need to do, let's go play. So we did. And I know Styx was the same way. So it's a work ethic, that you're there to do a job. Someone's paying you to do a job. You do the best you can. Rich, we had been playing there a bunch, and Rich said, I want to put you guys in the Civic Arena. Wow, that's like a 15,000, 16,000 seat hall at the time. And he said, we're going to do 2 shows. Okay. Just us. You guys will be headlining, there'll be opening bands. And we headlined there, and unbeknownst to us, we beat Elvis Presley's record at that hall for both nights. Both nights we beat his record, both nights when we played there. And we thought that was pretty cool, because I remember Elvis and thought, we can do that. That's something maybe a lot of bands don't do, but that was because of Rich Engler. I want to make that clear. He promoted that show in such a way. He went after that, and he made that happen. Yes, Kansas was on top of the world at the time and selling a lot of tickets and selling a lot of records, but when we think of that gig, we think of Rich Engler. As far as Kansas and the length of our sets and things like that, we're usually more about quality than we are quantity, and I think as the more records that we had that would come out, we had more material to play. So if you saw us early in our career with just one album, well, we had to jam a lot of those songs. There was drum solos and all, because we didn't have enough material to play a full headlining set. We couldn't play 90 minutes because we didn't have that much music. Then we had a second album and a third album, and as that came along, we were able to add those songs to our set, and we had less jamming and less drum solos, yay, and we were able to play more songs. So that's really what happens usually to most bands, is you just have a lot of material. So nowadays we do a 2.5-hour show from like 10 or 11 or 12 different Kansas albums. So we're picking songs from all of them, which is a good, nice luxury to have. And anybody in any of the incarnations of Kansas will tell you that it's about the music, because members have come and gone. Very instrumental, no pun intended, instrumental members in the success of this band have come and gone, have chosen to either retire or do other things or whatever. And the band continues because we have that music. And it's the music of Kansas that people come to hear. And there'll be some of us that are still around since the first album, but the most recent guys are are accepted just as well by the fans. So it's the music. That's all it can be, because it's not like we were movie stars or anything like that, or anything other than just guys from Kansas. So it has to be the music and how well we play it or how well we don't play it. So yeah, we had a new album out about 2 years ago that did very well, and we're getting ready to write another one this year that'll come out in 2020. And it's interesting because, most classic rock bands don't mess with new stuff, or they might do a song or a few and put it on the internet or something, but we have to have new stuff. As a band, it's very hard for us to just regurgitate the old stuff over and over and over. I've played Carry On Wayward Son for 40 years now, and still love it and still enjoy playing it, every night. And but every once in a while, you got to have some new stuff. You have to have new material that feeds the creative juices. Otherwise, we're a jukebox. And there's nothing wrong with being those are great songs too, but you got to do new stuff. As musicians, you have to create new stuff. Obviously, it's not received as well because that audience is gone. That audience doesn't even buy CDs anymore. We haven't sold CDs in years. Everything is streamed or downloaded off the internet, So the times have changed, and but that's okay. We'll do new music, and just happy to have the opportunity to do it. Well, I think anybody that's been around as long as we have is going to have relationships with a lot of people in the business, whether it's booking agents or whether it's travel agents or whether it's attorneys or whether it's promoters or even other musicians. So many of the bands back in those, and we've all come up together, whether it's Rush and Cheap Trick and Aerosmith and Styx and Foreigner and Kansas and Boston. I mean, we all saw each other back then because we were working together, and we still see each other today. So it's something that era musically stays there, but I think business-wise, a lot of the promoters have dropped out or have been bought out. They've just been bought out and they're over it. Have Live Nation come in or AEG or whomever and just buy out their promotional business. But so that's why it's always special with Rich. It's he's been there from the beginning and he's still there, and he does an incredible job. It's not like, well, we just let Rich do our gigs because we feel sorry for him. He's a tremendous promoter, and I think any artist that's worked with him will tell you that, and it's an honor for us, whether we're doing this documentary or whether we're working with him doing shows. It's an honor for us to work with him because he's earned it. He's earned it. It's that simple. What will happen is lots of times with the promoter, you put a show on sale and it will start to sell tickets. And as soon as that promoter breaks even, he'll stop promoting. He won't spend anymore. And you're going, promoter person, you need to keep, because that's the gravy. That's the percent, that's the extra money you're going to be making, that we're going to be making. But they don't want to risk it. They're only going to spend up to a certain amount. Okay, we've made a little bit of money. Stop. Don't want to risk anymore because we might not sell any more tickets. And then I'd start losing money. It'll start going the other way. And I won't say that's a common practice, but it's something that I see out there, but not with Rich. He gets more excited about doing a Kansas show than we do. He's like, oh man, I'm going to do this, and we're going to go to WDV, and we're going to do this, and we're going to just blow the tickets out. And he always does. He always does. So it's a good thing that we work with Rich Engler. It's been great for our career and for the friendships. I think you have to look at, there's a lot of spokes in the wheel of a promoter. It's not just he's a cool guy or he dresses well or whatever. It is his business sense, but it has to lock with our band. He can't promote us the way he promotes Kiss or the way he promotes someone else. He knows how we want, and he knows what radio stations to go to, and what we will do to promote and things we won't do to promote. And he's very sensitive to that. Okay, he'll ask me one question. Hey, Phil, what's the chance of... No, it's not going to happen. Okay. And he moves on to something else. He doesn't keep pushing it in my face or whatever. And we appreciate that. This is how we do business. And that's how Rich does business. And they meld together. And it makes it not only fun, but it makes it profitable, which are the two things I require for a gig: fun, profit. And you heard that first here. I think for bands, today's bands, finding someone like Rich Engler will be the least of their problems. That will be the least of their problems, that any up-and-coming bands that want to earn a living and create something for themselves as a living, as performing in an original band, as Kansas has, or any other bands that we've talked about, good luck. You look at any of the Grammy nominations, you look at any of the things that are going on with, there are no bands anymore. None. Gone. There are a lot of solo artists, that have dancers behind them and stuff like that, and people that hold microphones and earn a great living doing what they're doing. That's fantastic. Good for them. Great. But then you have bands. You have a whole nother part of the music industry that's being totally ignored. So, as I said, the last thing they want to worry about is somebody like Rich Engler. They've got to get, first of all, they've got to get the industry to turn around. And the industry is going to go where the demand is. They're going to go where the demand is for R&B and rap and solo artists, all that kind of stuff is in demand. Nobody's shoving it down anybody's throat. That's what the young people want to hear. All right, well, I get it. I'm not a young person, obviously, so that's not my cup of tea. So when I'm looking for bands, there's nothing there. And it's, when I say nothing, there's no, there might be, Greta Van Fleet or some new thing that's kind of popping up, but does it have any staying power? Will that band have a Dust in the Wind? Will that band have a Carry On Wayward Son? Will that, and I don't even know, I mean, radio doesn't even play that anymore. So you have to discover it on YouTube, which is great, but that's where those bands have to go. And people say, well, music can be heard. Well, it can be heard, but it's not being promoted. Yeah, I mean, we'll do demos of it. Some of the songwriters will make, demos of the song so we can hear what they, back in the day, we just had a cassette. And Carrie would put it in there and play the song on there and then play us the cassette. That's the only way we heard, or reel to reel, that's the only way we heard Dust in the Wind. He just hit a button, and while he was playing the finger exercise of Dust in the Wind on the recorder, he would sing the melody and read the lyrics. So that's how we got it. Nowadays, when you go in there, you can have it programmed, and a lot of stuff that you play to is what's actually going to be on the album. So you can improve the ability to record by hearing more things. So in a lot of ways, those tools really help you a lot, but it's still us programming. It's still us writing the lyrics, writing the chords of the song, still doing the drum beats, still playing the bass parts, everything like that. The musician is still putting his mark, on his part. In putting a record together, it is a long process for Kansas. It always has been, because the music takes so long to write and to put together and lyrically work out, and the arrangements. It's an endeavor that takes, by the time we're done, probably 6 or 7 months. By the time we've put it all together and have it mixed and mastered and everything and ready to go. That may not seem like a long time to some people, and other people that, up in Nashville, they can knock out an album in 2 weeks. And maybe even less than that, because they know what they're doing up there, and it's they're very good at what they do in Nashville. We have recorded in Nashville before, and it's an incredible part of the world. It really is, in the musical world. So it's just something that we start out with some ideas, and people turn them into songs, and then we rehearse them, and we rearrange, and then go into the studio and rearrange again, and then put everything down. And it's a long process. It's not an easy thing to do. One thing that I look back on that I'm really proud that we did was all our dates with Queen. It was of course, it was such a special time period for us to all of a sudden, and Queen hadn't hit their stride yet. We were playing with them for a Sheer Heart Attack. And that was the album where they were playing small theaters, 2,000 people, 25. We were the opening band for Queen. And so we got the album cover and we just went, oh boy, this isn't going to work. Richard goes, I'm not going to like this guy. I just know I'm not going to like him. We're going, but we hit it off great. And to this day, Kansas and Queen have a very unique relationship with each other. But as I look back and going to see the film, Bohemian Rhapsody and stuff, boy, talk about take you somewhere. I mean, I would just go at times during the film. I'd go, what? Wait a minute! I was there at that. That we were part of that. Kansas was part of that, of this incredible thing called Queen. Not that we had anything to do with their success, but we were there while it was happening. I remember they took water and poured it all over Roger's drums, and he'd do this drum solo. This water was going I'd look and I'd go, is that rice? It looked like the drops of water and all the lights looked like rice. Did he put rice on his drums? Obviously it wasn't rice. But I thought, God, he must be so rich that he can pour water on his drums, and he must have so much money. That's what impressed me at the time, as well as he was such a great drummer. But I don't know if it was something that we achieved, but it was something that we were part of. And it wasn't like we shared it with 100 other bands, like some sort of festival or a hall that we played there and sold it out, and a bunch of other people have sold it out. But not that many bands can say that they did. We did the next tour, they did too. So I think we did 50 to 60 to 70 shows with Queen. And that's a pretty special thing, that I know all the guys in the original band. That's a special time period for all of us. But here's the thing, though. This is the difference. Somebody, and it shows in the film, I don't remember the guy's name, but somebody gave them a chance to be Queen. They were playing clubs, just like Kansas was. Don Kirshner gave Kansas a chance to be Kansas. And in the film, it shows the guy, I can't remember who it's played by, but he does a great job. He gave Queen a chance to be Queen. That's not happening nowadays to bands. There could be the best band in the world out there, but until somebody, to me, I have this saying, you have to find somebody who cares. And when I talk to younger bands, I always say, well, how are we going to get, how are we supposed, you have to find somebody who cares. If they don't care, and you can't find anybody that cares, guess what? Nothing's going to happen. You have to find a Don Kirshner or a person that takes a band to the next level. And that can be, Rich Engler, Clive Davis, any of those people who gave artists a chance to develop and turn into something that's been substantial. It's called artist development. Does not exist anymore. It's not even in record company budgets. Tell me how many Facebook fans you have, how many likes you have, and what are your numbers on YouTube. And if you have in the millions or whatever, maybe we'll sign you. You have to have a passion for what you're promoting, for what you're talking to people about. You've got to hear this artist or this band. You've got to hear it because I think they're awesome. Well, if you don't have that passion and you're just showing them Facebook numbers, it may not catch. It may, but it may not. It depends. It was something that I just kind of took over 30 years ago, is managing the band. And I've managed the band into up to almost 30 years now. And I never planned to be a manager. It wasn't anything I wanted to do, but it just kind of happened. So I've been involved with the band's business for a long, long time. And it's, I'm always amazed. I'm always amazed that every year that a bunch of promoters in different parts of the country and different parts of the world go, let's have Kansas. Really? I mean, how does that happen? How does our name come across? Of course, we have a booking agent who's working it, and we have certain parts of the country that we do well in. And so I understand the hard work that we've put in probably reflects on our integrity more than anything else, is that we've worked hard to keep the band sounding this way, and that it's important to us that we're sounding this way, and it's because we know it's important to our fans. We'd have no promoters if we had no fans. I don't care how great of a promoter you are. If you don't have people coming through that door and paying money to see us, well, he's not going to call us. So by keeping the integrity of the band high and keeping the music quality high, it keeps our fans coming back, because they know when I go in to see Kansas, that band's going to be playing the best they can every night. And so the fans are what's really responsible for the band still being around. No fans, no band. No fans, no promoters. No promoters, no band. So it all leads back to the fans, and that's who we owe it to, is our fans and our new fans. I mean, Supernatural, the TV show Supernatural, has put us back on the map with the young people, because Wayward Son is the unofficial theme song of Supernatural. All of a sudden, we have these tweeners that they don't even know it's Kansas. They just like Carry On Wayward Son. A band is a difficult thing to keep together, because you have a lot of people pulling in different directions, wants, desires, needs, families, lifestyles. All those affect the band. So it helps that we're all pulling in the same direction. It helps that a lot of the band members, if they don't want to do this, have decided to do other things. That helped, because that particular person in the band obviously didn't want to be here, so it hamstrung us somewhat. It kind of made it difficult to do things that we wanted to do, because that particular person just didn't want to do them. That particular person moved on. Wish him the best. Love you, dude. Thanks for all the years. But now it takes the handcuffs off, and we're able to do things that we haven't been able to do in the past. So it's a family. I mean, it really is. It's if anybody's had brothers and sisters, you get along with some of them and you hate the other one's guts. I mean, it's just a constant turning over. But getting back to the two things, the not fun and profit, getting back to the music and the fans. The music and the fans. Without the music, there's no fans. Without the fans, there's no music. So those things, lock, and you have to concentrate. The music will bring the fans back, will bring the fans in. And that's what you got to concentrate on. If seats are empty all the time now, all of a sudden, you're not doing your job. And that's, it's interesting with the fans too. And I think most classic rock bands will tell you this. As their members change, Kansas is not the only band that's had members change. All those bands, other than maybe even Cheap Trick, had ZZ Top, Rush. Of course, they only have 3 members. It's got to be a lot easier. But they still have their original members. But most of us have changed members, and those are just growing pains. That's all it is. But as long as the music's good and it's played well and it's to a degree of quality that they're used to, they're going to keep coming back. I mean, really, Journey's on their 4th singer.
Yeah.
Their 4th singer, and they're doing bigger and better business than they have in a long, long time. That speaks well to the band and the music. The band are playing their asses off. Arnell's out there selling it every night, singing. And the fans are there. They're there in legions coming to see them. And so it's possible, as long as you pay attention to your craft and pay attention to the music and your fans. We make fun of ourselves all the time when people say, God, man, you've been doing it for so long, and how do you guys keep doing this? Are you ever going to give up? And we go, well, this is the only thing we know how to do. It's not like I have a lot of college degrees that if I don't do this, that I'm going to go, build an app or something. This is what I do. This is what I was meant to do. And the guys in the band, most of them will tell you that this is what I do best in life. Of all the things I could do, this is what I do. And to be able to do this or do what those people want to do, if you don't have the passion, you'll never amount to anything without passion in your life. If you don't care about what you're doing and love what you're doing, it ain't going to happen. You'll end up giving up because it was just too hard. It was too hard. And so if you have the passion, and that's what gets you up every day. That's what puts you in the car or the bus for 20 some hours while you drive across the state of Texas, going to some gig, or on a 24-hour flight to Singapore or something. It's because you want to go there and you want to play. And it's the passion for that that makes you hang in there through the bad times and the good times. But that's applicable to any job. Any job that you have is if you don't have the passion for what you're doing, you'll become bored with it. You'll become unhappy with it. You'll become frustrated with it. And not that I haven't been bored, frustrated, and unhappy at times going, I got to figure that out. How do I figure that part? But because I want to, because I have the passion to figure it out, I figure it out. And you know, Kansas' career has been like this. It has not been like this, or, you know, we've plateaued many times. We've even dipped at times. And you got to fight to get back up, you know, to get back up there. So it's, nothing has ever been given to this band, ever. And it's the kind of thing that, so that's what I would tell them. If you had a group of people here that wanted to do anything in life, you know, how did Kansas do it? It was a passion for the music, a passion for what we do and what we wanted to deliver, and make it the best that we can. And so have a nice life, you people, and I hope it works out, and don't send any hate mail to me, you know.